Hey there, it's Gregory from Dapp University. So I've got a few special guests on the channel today that I'm super excited to have on here. I've got Josh and Scott from Truffle to demo what they're working on with Truffle Teams. So this is a really exciting new feature that I asked them to show us today on the channel. So welcome, Josh and Scott. Excited to have you on today. Tell you what, why don't you just give us a quick elevator pitch about what Truffle Teams is, what it can do, and then kind of once we get an idea of what we're going to see today, we'll roll on with the interview.
Yeah, happy to. So Truffle Teams is Truffle's first SaaS product, and we built it to answer the collaboration and operational needs of Dapp developers. So as they're releasing mature applications and kind of, as we say, reaching 1.0, they're running into needs like wanting a more robust deployment process, needing to monitor their contracts on live networks. And so we built Truffle Teams to really answer that and provide a streamlined experience with Truffle's open source tools.
That's great. So it sounds to me like, this is meeting the needs that some developers are used to from maybe a Web 2.0 paradigm where you have an application, you put it out there in the wild, and you want to kind of have a pipeline where you can, monitor the deployment process, and then also it will also streamline the deployment process, but then kind of monitor it once it's out there in the wild. Is that about right?
That is exactly right. Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, let's just jump in and get started.
Cool. So on my screen here, we see Truffle's open source suite of tools, and I always like to start here to kind of tell the full story. And so what this graphic here represents, and you may have seen it on our homepage, is really the flow of code from the left-hand side here. We've got our Solidity, and we use Truffle's tool suite to arrive at a finished app here on the right-hand side. And so I know there are many users of Truffle's tools watching here most likely, so I won't belabor this point, but to kind of go through this process. So your Solidity, you're going to use Truffle to compile those smart contracts, deploy them to a network, run some tests, perhaps debug some failing transactions. And then of course we've got Ganache. Before we go to a live test net, we're probably going to want to deploy to something a little faster and then something we can kind of peer under the hood to a greater degree with, and that's exactly the need Ganache fills. So you've got your one-click development chain on your local PC. And then finally, we arrive at Drizzle, and this is going to really allow front-end developers to do what they do best, which is craft the UI without having to worry too much about the data. Drizzle helps really connect that plumbing, so talking to your wallet, synchronizing smart contract data with the front end, things of that nature. And then finally, we hit our resulting Dapp. But kind of as I said earlier, Truffle's open source suite of tools has helped many development teams create their Dapps. But as development teams, companies, etc., are reaching the point of releasing their Dapp on a live network, they're running into these operational needs. And so kind of zooming out from that development process, we're looking now at like the entire application development lifecycle. So starting at planning here, we kind of go around in these iterative cycles, and Truffle's open source suite really covers this left-hand side very well, as we kind of just mentioned, which is that code build and test step. And then starting on this right-hand side, as we're hitting the point where we want to release, we run into the operational needs that I mentioned earlier. So more robust deployment process and managing multiple deployed instances, monitoring our contracts after they've been deployed so we can see if any errors are occurring, things of that nature. And so to that end, that is exactly why we built Truffle Teams, and I'm super excited to show it to you all today. So before I dive into the demo, a little bit of what I like to do is there's sort of three sections that are interwoven through it. So I'll of course show what's available today if you go to my.truffleteams.com and sign up. We're also going to take a look at a feature that is available in private preview, but is going to be released very shortly, likely by the time this video is released, actually. And then actually throughout the presentation, I'll kind of weave in the short-term and long-term roadmap so you can get an idea of where it's going after this as well.
Great, let's get started.
And here we are. So the only step I skip for time is logging in, but I will mention that you do either sign up or log in with your GitHub account. Truffle Teams is fully integrated with GitHub, kind of backs our CI service. With that, I'll kind of give a brief overview of what we're going to look at that's available today. And so kind of thinking back to that development lifecycle, the first stop is going to be our continuous integration service. So we're going to want to be continuously testing our smart contracts, of course, to make sure that nothing's going wrong there. Once we've run our tests, we're going to want to deploy those contracts to a live network, and Truffle Teams, as I mentioned, helps you manage multiple deployed instances through a visual deployment screen, which we'll take a look at today as well. We'll also take a look at creating shared Ganache sandboxes in the cloud, so you have a quick collaborative development environment in a single click. And then finally, once our contracts are deployed, we're going to take a look at the monitoring side of things, so we can see the status of our contracts once they're deployed as well. Yeah, and so kind of starting out here, we arrive after we've logged in at our list of repositories here. You can see there's a little pin icon here next to the Teams demo repo, and you can actually pin frequently used repositories up at the top here, which is why I've got the Teams demo on there. You can, of course, filter these as well. So in this case, if I wanted to see like the Metacoin box, we can get it to rise to the top by doing some filtering here. Helpful for teams with large numbers of repos. I'm going to click in here to the Teams demo repository. And we arrive here at the build screen. So you notice that the nav bar on the left here is kind of organized with that development lifecycle in mind. And so we start here with our builds. And we see some various ones that have run against this repo. In this case, I'm going to click in here to number 6 because the past builds have a little more output for us to take a look at. And now that we're in here, we kind of see some data that we would expect, such as the commit message that kicked off, the commit message, excuse me, for the commit that kicked off this build. We see the branch that it ran against, the duration, some details of that nature. One thing that's useful to point out here is that there is some nice contextual linking throughout the application. So if we click the commit hash, we can hop right into GitHub and see the commit here. And in this case, I just made a small change to the README to kick off this build as an example. And then down here, we have our console output. So anytime you run your tests with Truffle Teams' internal CI service, it's going to spin up a container and install our dependencies and run our tests. And so we notice our build up here did pass. So I'll kind of scroll to the bottom and we can kind of show the proof there. The native script package really takes a lot of console output there during its compilation step.
Looks familiar.
Yeah, exactly, right. Nice, and so down at the bottom here, we see that yes, in fact, all 5 of our tests did in fact pass. One cool thing to note here is that the test runner is not picky, so we did run both JavaScript and Solidity tests. The way I like to say it is basically if it will run with the truffle test command on your local machine, it will run in Truffle Teams.
Great.
Yeah. So a little bit about where this is going in the future. The built-in CI service is great if you're either just starting out or you want something really quick. But many teams signing up for this will likely have existing build processes, and we want to be able to integrate those. And so that's exactly what you'll be able to do. There will be a setting that allows you to hook into external services, and then your existing build pipeline in GitHub will have its status displayed here rather than using the team's internal service. So let's say you've got Circle CI and coveralls hooked up, for example. We'll run those services and show you the status here rather than use our internal process. So great for integration with existing teams. And then once our code is built, we're going to want to deploy it to a network, and we'll come back to that sandboxes item there. And so to that end, here we've got our visual deployment screen. And so I'll kind of go through what we're looking at here and talk about how to use it. So on the left here, we see we've got all of our commits. And this really shows some of the great benefits right away of having a lot of these functions integrated together in this tool in Teams. And so this indicator here is representative of our build status. And we can see here next to our past builds here that we actually have this little parachute icon. And what this will do is launch us into a deployment wizard. So this will walk you through step by step, choosing a network, connecting to your wallet, and you can use your browser wallet, in this case MetaMask, to deploy your contracts. One great thing to mention is that by extension, we get access to any hardware wallet integration offered there as well. So Ledger and Trezor, their integrations with MetaMask can also be used in here as well. So really easy hardware wallet deployment options there. Currently, Truffle Teams supports all of the live Ethereum networks. So that's going to be the 4 live test nets here, Ropsten, Rinkeby, Gurley, and Kovan. And it does support the mainnet as well. In the future, we'll be adding more deployment targets, such as private implementations of Ethereum, or also pointing to your own hosted node. We're also going to be adding sandboxes to that, which we'll take a look at here in a minute as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So I won't walk through. We won't have to. So we don't have to wait for the confirmation times on the deployment. I won't walk through that live.
That's okay.
But luckily, I do have an existing deployment right here as well. And so this card right here represents a deployed instance of this application. So you could either continue to create new instances. Let's say your team is working on 2 different feature branches and they necessitate different deployments. You'd be able to see and manage both of those here. But in this case, we've just got our one kind of as an example. So I'll show you what's going on here. So much like a build, we see the status of this deployment, and it did in fact succeed. And we can see the network it was deployed on as well. This is an external deployment, actually, and what that means is that I actually made this deployment before I signed up with Teams and uploaded the contract artifact files that Truffle produces. So once again, just we definitely know that Teams will have already, existing teams, will have likely already made deployments. This kind of goes back to the point I was making on the external CI. So Truffle Teams is very flexible in this regard. So in addition to the status here, we see the contracts that were included in this deployment. We've got some convenience functions here, like the ability to copy the address and creation transaction. And then once we have this deployed instance, we can do a few different things with it. If this were made within Teams, you'd be able to actually promote this deployment to a production network without having to come back over to your commits here. You also have the ability to download the artifact files so that you can use them potentially in your UI, things of that nature. And we can also, of course, archive these deployments. So in my feature branch example, if that feature is merged in and we don't need this particular staging instance anymore, we can archive it so it's not cluttering things up here. A little bit about where this is going in the future. So we saw that I was able to manually trigger a deployment by clicking that parachute icon there, but we want to allow for automated workflows in here as well. So you could imagine an example where a successful build on a particular staging branch automates a deployment to a staging network. So we want to allow for scenarios like that. And then kind of by extension, also integrating role-based access into this is another thing we're going to offer. So there could be a scenario where perhaps a lead or something, a supervisor needs to approve a production deployment. We want to allow for those type of workflows as well. And then I said we'd come back to this, and now is a good time. So I mentioned that the current visual deployment engine does support all of the various live Ethereum networks. But before going to those, you might want to use Ganache. And so Ganache is great for a single developer's machine. You can download it, install it, spin up a test chain very easily. But sharing that instance and collaborating on it there are quite a bit of hurdles there. It wasn't really originally built with that in mind, but we know that teams would really love this functionality. I mean, being able to share a Ganache instance is extremely valuable for speed, turnaround time, being able to iterate quickly without consequences, things of that nature. And so to that end, we offer this exact functionality in Teams in a feature that we call sandboxes. And so what these do, if you click this quick start sandbox button here, which I'll do while I'm talking through this, it's going to actually spin up a cloud instance of Ganache in the background. And see, there we go, it started right here. And so we supply you with the RPC URL and the mnemonic. And so just as you're used to with your typical Ganache UI or CLI instance, you can use this information in MetaMask, in Truffle, and you can do all of the things that you are used to. So Truffle's console, tests, deployments, all of these things work with these sandboxes with, of course, the huge benefit that anyone on the team can start collaborating on this right away. So much like you're used to with Ganache, you get your instant auto mining transactions, you get 10 pre-funded accounts. So it really makes getting up and running in a shared development environment incredibly, incredibly easy. A little bit about where this is going in the future. This is the feature that I mentioned was in private preview. We'll actually be releasing it to everyone next week. So like I said, it may actually be there already by the time some people are viewing this.
Probably.
Yeah. And so like in private preview, these are actually kind of isolated right now, but by the time they're out to the public, you'll be able to select a sandbox as a deployment target on the deployment screen, and you'll also be able to monitor the contracts deployed to these networks as well. And then kind of finally, where this is going as well is, you notice the quick start button is here, and this is kind of analogous to Ganache UI's quick start button. But we also want to add a new sandbox button that will allow for full configuration before creating the box, including the option to use a Ganache feature called forking. And what this lets you do is actually select a live network, such as, and even including mainnet, and you would select that network in a block, for example, and then Ganache would fork that network and essentially allow you to access the state and contracts on that network as if Ganache itself were that network. So to make a more concrete example out of this, let's say you need to work with some DeFi protocols, let's say Compound, for example, and their testnet deployment for testing reasons differs a little bit from their mainnet deployment. And so it'd be really nice for your application's purpose if you could just work with the true production mainnet deployment. And that's exactly what forking would allow you to do. So even though you're going through your Ganache instance with your free Ganache Ether, it will pull in the necessary contracts, state, and history from your end to make it appear that you are interacting with mainnet Compound. So it makes testing and integrations with existing dApps extremely easy because it makes it free and fast.
Yeah, that's very cool. So let me pause and maybe ask for clarification in case people don't fully understand what this benefit is. And I just want to make sure I fully understand the benefit. So basically what you're saying is, what this allows us to do is put a Ganache instance in the cloud where you're essentially creating your own new copy of the Ethereum mainnet frozen in time at a specific place where you can use it on Ganache.
Yes, exactly. Yep, that is a great summary of the forking feature.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And can you unlock certain other accounts on the network like you can with Ganache CLI with this?
Oh, as far as like an account on a mainnet or on a live testnet? You won't be able to do that. So it won't have a concept of like the accounts on that network, but it will pull in. You can interact with any of the contracts on that network, though.
Cool.
As you would with LiveNet.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So once we've got our contracts deployed either to a live network or to a sandbox, we're going to want to monitor those contracts. So I will hop over here to the monitoring screen. And I can tell you right away, yes, I'm going to have to switch repos here to something that's actually got some state. So I'll switch over here to Solidity Magic Square. This is a mainnet deployed contract. We've got here complex storage. Before I hop in there, I'll just note this upload artifacts button relates to that external deployment I was talking about earlier. So if you did have a deployment you made outside of Truffle Teams, you can upload your artifact files right here, and you'll see it on the monitoring and deployment screen as well. So clicking into this contract here, we see some of the live things that we are monitoring, including the balance up here as a live number. We also have some other pertinent details to the contract, such as its address, creation, transaction, and network up here. And then down here, we are monitoring these three categories of happenings, I suppose, on the chain. So the transactions, we separate out the failures, and I'll talk about why in a second here, and then we have the events as well. So we see down here the list of transactions, with some impertinent details such as the transaction hash, the gas used, etc. We've got a nice badge here that shows at a glance what type of transaction this was. In this case, a lot of these were calls. And then over here, we've got the failed transactions, which I mentioned we separated out for a couple reasons. The first one being, of course, development teams need to know fast and loudly when things fail so they can get in there and start diagnosing those errors. So it's just nice to have those pre-filtered for that purpose and for convenience. But secondly, in the near future, this is going to have Truffle debugger integration. So any of these failed transactions right here, you'll see a debug button that will drop you right into a graphical instance of Truffle's debugger. you can start stepping through and into and really surgically diagnose the error that caused this transaction to fail in particular.
And that could be transactions for the publicly deployed instance on the mainnet?
Yes. Yep. So this exact contract is deployed on mainnet, and you would definitely be able to use that same functionality for that.
With the debugger. Awesome. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And then finally here, we've got our events tab. And in this case, we do see the events down here, but this contract does not name this event. We are able to decode the event name here. So if this were like an ERC20, you might see some transfer events, things of that nature. But beyond that, we have some other details, such as the block time and the from address. But really, where this is going in the future can be summed up really in 3 words, and that's triggers, alerts, and anomaly detection. So an alert being, of course, information's coming to you either via email, a text message, things of that nature. And the 2 things that kick off those alerts are triggers and anomalies. And so triggers are user-defined actions. The Balance just updated their live. User-defined actions such as an address blacklist, or if you know a function should not be called externally, things of that nature, you'd be able to get an alert about that. And then secondly, anomalies are things that we already know would indicate a problem is happening that we can alert you about. Things such as the balance of the contract being drained, a sudden spike in failed transactions, things of that nature. So really increasing the live utility of the monitoring section without you having to be on this screen. In addition to even more additional data appearing on this screen as well. And so that's really the long and short of what's available today, and a little bit about what's coming soon in the future. Again, you can go to my.truffleteams.com and start using all of what I showed with your Dapp currently. But there are 2 other roadmap items I do want to hit on, but they are features that just didn't link into the other things, so I can't really smoothly work them in as much as some of the other items. And those 2 things, if you're reading my tabs, are the dashboard and the contract manager. And so starting here with the dashboard, we know that there's a lot of data coming from a lot of different places in this application, and we really want a place for the whole team to come and kind of at a glance get this bird's eye view of the application health and really see the status of their most recent deployment, or really of a deployment they select. So in this iteration of the dashboard here, you'll be able to select a deployment, and you'll see some information displayed about it here that, as I've said, gives you insight into the application health and kind of offers some more visual ways of displaying some of this data. So in addition to the commit and the deployment here, we see information like the transactions over time in a graph. And so we can note right here that, oh, wow, in December, this deployment maybe wasn't the best. There's some errors occurring in one of our contracts because we're getting an increase in failed transactions here in December. And then down here, in addition to some other useful data here in card format, we see our list of the contracts included in here. We can hop right over to the monitoring screen, and there's also this manage button that I will talk about here, and this is the contract manager. And so what this does is once your contract instances are deployed, it can be really helpful to start interacting with them right away, both from the standpoint of integration tests, for quick demos, really getting like initial feel around the user experience, things of that nature. And so to that end, the contract manager will auto-generate a contract UI here. You can see some of these functions here on the left-hand side. And then also, helpfully, will show the state of the contract as well over here on the right-hand side. So like I said, really great for quick integration tests, demos, things of that nature. So really excited to offer that as well. And that's really the long and short of it. So that covers, like I mentioned, what's available today and some short and long-term roadmap items as well. So hope you enjoyed.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great presentation. So yeah, there's some really great features in here. I mean, everything looks awesome. I'm really excited to get my hands on the shared blockchain implementation of Ganache in the cloud, basically. I forgot what Sandboxes. Sorry, I forgot the name already. Sandboxes look really awesome. I mean, everything looks great, but that one particularly stuck out to me as a huge thing. I'm sure lots of other people watching this are ready to get started with that as well. So where do people go? How do they sign up? If they want to ask you all questions about this or anything like that, where do we send the people?
Yeah, definitely. So if you want to sign up to check this out right now, you can either, if you want a little bit of a refresher, you can hit our landing page for this, which is trufflesuite.com/teams. Or if from this video you are ready to just hop in and start trying it out, you can go to my.truffleteams.com. And mine's going to go right into the application. But in the case of a new visitor, you'll see a login screen, which you can connect your GitHub account.
Okay. Well, if you send me that link, I'll make sure to put it down in the video description below.
Perfect. Oh, and then as far as support or questions or things like that, we do have a spectrum here, which I will, I won't bother trying to find the link right now. I'll give it to you for the description as well.
Sure. Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Josh. I really appreciate that. I think this is really awesome. You guys done great work here. I'm excited to see these other roadmap items kind of materialize and make it into the product. So everybody go check out Truffle Teams. I'll put a link down in the description below. Get started today so that you can, just take your smart contract development game up to the next level. This is really great. We're finally starting to see sort of the Web3 world get some of the bells and whistles that we're used to if you're coming from a Web 2.0 background. So this is really great work.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video there today, guys. We're kind of running out of time here on my end. But I really appreciate it, everybody. Go check us out. I've got the links down below. Subscribe to the channel as always. And until next time, thanks for watching Dapp University.